Welcome to Seek Reality. I'm Roberta Grimes, and I am so happy that you can be with us today. My dear, wonderful friends, for most of the decades that I was doing afterlife research, believe it or not, I was so isolated. I thought I seemed to be the only one who really cared enough to be researching the afterlife at all. It amazed me because frankly, everything I was finding was so exciting. All this evidence, especially from early in the 20th century. There had to be so many other people who cared, but nobody seemed to. But that was okay. There were very, very many good deep trance mediums back then, and their work was being documented in so many excellent books. And you could find them in the early 1970s, which is when I was doing a lot of this research. You could find them in great old used bookstores, never in new, of course, bookstores. And not in the 1970s, early 70s, I was in Boston. I was going to law school. I was in love. And I was every Saturday going to these old bookstores and finding these books. And I was reading. It took me about 2 years, and I can tell that story when we were with our guest about how I convinced myself that it was impossible for the afterlife not to be real. But I still felt so alone until one day, I think it was about 2008, Amazon sent me an email saying I might like this new book that just had been published. The book was called Your Eternal Self. The author was Dr. R. Craig Hogan. I bought the book and I devoured it. I said, wow, somebody else is also doing my research. I contacted him, and Craig was our very first guest when I finally started this podcast 12 years ago. And today is his 48th appearance. Do the math. 4 times a year, every year, Craig has been my guest. He's been our guest, frankly, faithfully. He's never said no whenever I've contacted him. Okay, about every 3 months since its program started 12 years ago, Craig Hogan has joined me here. We always try to talk about something different. So this time we think we'll go back to our roots a little bit and talk about humankind's relationship with death, which hasn't really advanced all that much. We try to get the word out, but there are reasons. We'll talk about those reasons why many people just don't want to know about it. But Craig and I have spent our lives doing a lot of things, actually, exciting and fun things, but also studying the process of death and also what comes after death. None of this is based on what any religion says or what any of us thinks or believes or has dreamed or magic stuff. It's all based on decades of actual study of what is going on. And it's exciting and beyond wonderful. And I am so happy to have Craig back again. Craig, welcome. I'm thrilled to have you here with us now.
Yeah, Roberta, it's a delight to be with you again. We always have a wonderful time. There's so much that people don't realize that we know now about the life after this life and what happens at the end of this life. It's been burgeoning. There's so much information available. And so we want to find any way we can to share it with people because it'll knock their socks off. If they just open their minds and look at the evidence, they're going to realize that we continue to live after the body dies. There is no death and there are no dead.
And it's all good news. That's what's the best part of it, because the religions often give us bad news. I mean, just yesterday, I had lunch. I mean, people contact me and say, "Hey, I'm in Austin. We have lunch." And I had lunch with a retired minister, and he said he was a Wesleyan. I guess he was a Methodist minister. That's what it was. And he said that most Methodists don't really believe in the afterlife. And I said, wow, it's like the Stone Age if they don't believe in the afterlife. But they don't want to know because, hellfire, damnation, all the things that the religions, especially Christianity, so often teach, they'd rather not know. Surprised me. But don't you think that's terrible?
Yeah, it
Really
is terrible.
terrible?
It is terrible. And but I do see differences now. I see a real change. It's only been in the past couple of decades that I see the scientists. I like to study the science that's being done now about quantum mechanics and the nature of reality and string theory and all of the other science that we know today. And all of the science is now coming down to realizing that the idea of materialism, the idea that there is a mechanical universe that's outside of us, simply is untenable. It's simply not true. And so more scientists are now coming down to that, and they're saying, well, where do we go from here? What do we do from here? And they're reluctant to go to the next step, which is to say that everything is consciousness. There is nothing but God. And we are aspects of that. We are part of that. And once they come down to that realization, then they're going to see the fact that we don't die when the body dies, that we continue to live after the body dies. But I'm seeing a real strong effort, a strong movement in that direction now, just in the past couple of centuries or a couple of decades.
I'm glad you're that optimistic about it
Hmm.
because you tend to be a leader in thinking about these things. But to me, it was quite disheartening. He wanted to talk to me about all this because he's trying to write a book about it for Methodists. Sort of, this is why you don't need to sort of not think about it and sort of try to ignore it. But
Yeah.
ignoring it is not, I explained to him why ignoring it is not a good idea because if you come up with an alternative idea, and this is something we ought to let people know, if you come up with an alternative idea of what comes after death, your mind is very powerful and you can create what is called a hollow heaven, which is an alternative reality for your own mind to go to. And you can wander around on a cloud with St. Peter's gates right there. And eventually you'll have to be rescued from your own hollow heaven. Other people may be there too, but they'll be as confused as you are. There is a genuine afterlife and there's a process for going there, and you need to be open-minded about it in order to be able to go there successfully.
Yeah.
And people need to know that.
Yeah.
So
And
that's why we have a website, and we'll mention it several times in the process of talking today. And it is called seekreality.com. We
yeah.
operate this website together, but the person doing the lion's share by far of the work there is my wonderful friend Craig. He is a star. I began it. I was totally at sea. And so Craig said, hey, let me give you a hand. And pretty soon he gave me two hands. And then he gave me his whole mind and his whole body. And he did the whole thing. And he's been doing the whole thing ever since. He does a wonderful job. But it's the best place on earth to go to learn the truth about what's actually going on when it comes to dying and the afterlife. It's a beautiful website. Just go there when you're, after wait till we're through talking, but then go to seekreality.com and you can learn the truth. And once you learn the truth, you'll wish you had learned the truth sooner because it frees you from every possible fear. Let's talk about the big fear. People are afraid of hell. I've done bad things in my life. I just know. I know. I'm not sure I can escape the possibility I'm going to end up in hell. Craig, what do we do about that?
Yeah, it's a mythology. There is no truth to it. There is no such place as hell. There never was a place like hell. It originated in the early Christian church. It was also in the Muslim religion. It is in, it's called, there are beings called Hamzads that are in the Muslim religion, but in Christianity, it was originated in the first century, and it developed then gradually over the next few centuries until it was full blown as a belief. But it is not in the earliest writings of the Christian church. It's not in the Acts of the Apostles. It's not in Mark, the earliest gospel. It's not in the epistles of Paul or the other epistles that are part of the New Testament canon. It is nowhere to be found there. It is something that the church then developed based upon previous mythologies that came out of Zoroastrianism. And they then created the idea of the hell to keep people in line. And then it was to to proselytize people, to bring them into the fold. But if it had been real, then the early Christians would have made much of it to bring people into the religion that was developing then, into Christianity before it was actual Christianity. And so they would have used that. That would have been part of their ammunition to bring people in. But it's not in the Acts of the Apostles, and it's not in Paul, and it's not in Mark. It simply is a fabrication that was created by the church and then developed over time, especially by the poets like Dante and Milton. And then it came into popular notions. Today, 68% of the people in a Pew Research still believe there is such a place as hell. And it's just a mythology. And so people have to get rid of that idea. There is no judgment. There is no condemnation. So when people come into the next life, then they go through a life review, and then they will judge themselves. They will learn from the life review. But there is no one outside of them who's going to be doing any judgment. There is no condemnation into hell. Everyone is met with love and compassion. Those who take their own life are met with love and compassion. Everyone there is met in the same way. And there is no punishment for anything anyone has done during this lifetime.
No, in fact, in the Gospel of John, Jesus says, God judges no one, but he has given all judgment to the Son so that all may honor the Son just as they honor the Father. So God, we know God does not judge us. Jesus tells us that. Mm-hmm. And then he says, I don't judge anyone either because I didn't come to judge the world. I came to save the world. And he tells us what he came to save the world from, which was ignorance. He came to teach. That was it. Now, people come back to us with, there are places where Jesus talks about Gehenna. What is Gehenna? Gehenna is the, what do we call them? The sort of the burn pits, which were outside Jerusalem.
The Valley of Hinnom, yeah.
Yes. Mm-hmm. And where did the idea of Jesus even talking about those burn pits come from? It came from the mind of the Roman Emperor Constantine. How did Constantine get involved? Well, after the death and resurrection of Jesus, he did die and he did rise from the dead. We could talk about that as well a bit later on if you'd like. But after all of that, there were a variety, many versions of the way of Jesus. And Jesus, rather the immediate followers of Jesus, tolerated all those different ways. Let a thousand flowers bloom, as they say. But all of them were based in love. And frankly, the Roman Emperor Constantine could not use ways of looking at the teachings of Jesus that were based in love. I mean, no Roman emperor can use anything based in love. He needed something based in fear. Well, there was one of them that interpreted the crucifixion of Jesus, and I'll tell you why Jesus chose to be crucified afterwards. But there was one that said Jesus must have died as a sacrifice. They were sacrificing animals in the temple, and there were sin sacrifices. Jesus died as a sin sacrifice. Aha! And if that's what he was, then that's something that Constantine really could use. So he called, in 325 AD, he called the First Council of Nicaea, and they put together a religion. That was a great religion because it was based in fear. And what do we call that religion today? We call it Christianity, and it's based in fear. I'm just telling you the truth. I went to college to learn all this stuff. And fortunately, I was taught there by someone who was still personally furious with the Roman Emperor Constantine all these many years. She looked to me old enough at the time probably to have been at the council, not First Council of Nicaea in 325 CE. So I figured she was a witness to all this, but that's another day conversation. But and nonetheless, this is what he did. He took one of the strains of thinking in the year 325, and actually 312, because that was when he actually started his religion. And it was based in fear because it came up with a reason why Jesus was crucified, that had him crucified as a sin sacrifice, which was a Jewish idea at the time, a sin sacrifice of a small animal. No, this was a big sin sacrifice to God. And as a big sin sacrifice, it wiped out all our sins forevermore. One more sin sacrifice of God's Son will do it. And it did, right? I mean, that was it. But the trouble is, it was against everything. Think what it says about God. God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son as a sacrifice. Well, what kind of a daddy does that? Picks up his beloved child and says, here, if you sacrifice my son to me, I will forgive you. What kind of a daddy is that? That's horrible. What a horrible idea that is. And it never made, God never said it, and Jesus never said it. And it makes no sense to you and me today. That's the story, the real story behind the notion that Jesus died for our sins. It came from the Roman Emperor Constantine 300 plus years after Jesus' death. Amen. Forget it.
Yeah,
Right? That's really where it came from.
that's where it came from. But what happened was in the early church, soon after Jesus' death,
It
the
didn't
church
exist.
was it
For
didn't exist.
300 years, it did
There
not
was no
exist as an idea.
Christianity, right? So there was no Christianity. There were little gatherings that were called ecclesia,
Yep.
and these little gatherings would get together. They had no central knowledge, no central doctrines that they followed, and they were just sharing stories about this man Jesus, people had met, and they were so impressed with what he was teaching and with the wonders that he had done, and so they would get together in these small family church gatherings, and they would talk about Jesus and over a period of time, then that developed into having leaders, and the leaders then became bishops. But the bishops were not part of the early church.
Nope.
And the bishops then became a larger organization, and that organization then took over, and then that became the monstrous organization that became Christianity. But the early church had many, many different beliefs about who Jesus was.
Yes.
The Gnostics were one group who had a wonderful message for humankind about Jesus. It had nothing to do with sacrifice and penitence and all of the other nonsense the church developed later on. But it said that we can have the same knowledge that Jesus was giving to people if we just go inside and we understand what it was that he was trying to say. It's an uplifting message that then was lost by the church. But the Gnostics had it right, and they were the ones
It
who
was
lost
wiped
out.
out by Constantine. As soon as he had it in 300 plus BCE, the catacombs have no depictions of crosses at all. The notion of crucifixion was not even in their minds. And there are, what, 10 million burials there? And not a single depiction of a cross. There are depictions of Jesus as Jesus, and he has a goat around his shoulders, not a lamb, because he was saving even the goats. He was caring for everyone. It's a beautiful, beautiful depiction. But can you imagine not a single cross? There's no depiction of a cross on any burial anywhere until I think it's almost 500 AD.
Yeah, and that was also a result of its development out of the Jewish tradition,
Hmm.
because originally the early people who were learning about Jesus and were following what he was saying, they were at the synagogues, so they
Hmm.
were there with the Jews at the time.
Yeah, it
They
wasn't
just
part
had
of
they just
Judaism.
had a little different interpretation. They had an interpretation of Jesus, and so in the earliest church, none of this ecclesiastical the shrouds that have been put on Jesus and his life were not there. They were very much an understanding of who Jesus was. There was an early book that was circulated among them called the Didache, and the Didache had the very basic understanding of who Jesus was and what his teachings were, and it had nothing to do with the sacrifice, had nothing to do with this idea that somehow he was the lamb who was going to save the world. But what it did say was that he was a wonderful man who had a message for all of humankind
Yes, he was
that
the
would
great
make a
teacher.
difference for us. He was the great teacher. And that was lost then. That was supplanted by the doctrines of the Christian church that developed then and
Well,
was
Constantine
reinforced.
wiped it out. I mean, he was killing millions and millions. Anybody who was a Christian had to hide, who was a follower of Jesus. He tried to wipe every follower of Jesus out who was not a member of his new religion.
Yeah, so we know so
Anyway,
much
we're,
more.
we're getting off track, but this is something that's important for people to know because everyone sort of thinks this is that the religion we have now that bears Jesus's name was somehow related to Jesus. He didn't start it, Constantine did, and nothing that it teaches really has anything to do with Jesus. Jesus
Yeah.
was teaching a glorious set of teachings that had nothing to do with what is taught in the church now. So,
Except for the love, except for the love. And when they mention love and caring and
yes, that's all from Jesus.
yeah,
It's not
love,
from Constantine,
love
but
others
he
as
always
you
had a
love
sword in
yourself.
his hand.
So
Oh,
those things did come through, and so if you look at the canon, if you look at the Gospels, then there are parts of it that do have the original Yeshua, the Jesus of the time who came through.
the
And
Gospels are right. Those four Gospels are
those four
right.
gospels, they've got some of it in there, but then it was taken over by the church. But there are other gospels too, the Gospel of Thomas, which is a
Yes.
wonderful gospel with sayings from Jesus, and it's full of the real interpretations of what Jesus was saying. But that was taken out of the canon because it didn't fit with the narration that the
Mhm.
church wanted to put forth. And so it and many other gospels, there were 400 gospels that were circulating around at the time. We came down to four. But the early church had many different views of who Jesus was and what his message was. But the Gnostics especially had a very sound interpretation. They understood that he was the great teacher. He was saying to them, you can have love for each other and love for yourself. And in doing so, then you are going to enter the kingdom of heaven, which is within you.
Oh, so beautiful.
Hmm.
But here we are now. And why do we know? Why do Craig and I know? Why are we so confident to teach what happens when you die? And what this wonderful place is that we go to after death, and it's universal. Everyone goes there. It doesn't matter what your religion is. It doesn't matter what you've done during life. It's everything is forgiven. You only need to forgive yourself. That's the difficult part and really the crucial part of this whole experience that we have on Earth.
Yeah.
There's a lot of evidence. The evidence is really crucial for everyone to understand. I'll just say quickly where I got mine, and then Craig can maybe tell us a little bit about where he got his and why he's so confident about it. When I right when I got out of college, I spent a lot of time in Boston because I was going to law school. I had already fallen in love, and he was at BU law school, BU medical school, and then doing his residency. I was at BU law school, and every Saturday I would comb through all these old used bookstores, and that was, I guess, just about the time when a lot of people who had bought these books that I was finding were young, and they were dying at this point, and in the 70s, early 70s, and their books were getting into these bookstores, and so I bought them all. They were books which had been written around the turn of the 20th century, and they were books that had been written by people who had been attending seances of the great deep trance medium. Gladys Osborne Leonard was my favorite, but there were a number of great, great mediums who had developed during the 19th century. And they were a, a deep trance medium, and maybe you'd like to explain what they are, but they're, as I understand it, they go into a very deep trance, which really is only possible to develop if you can spend a great deal of time sitting in the dark and without the distractions of any kind of other entertainment at night. This is all you do is sit in the dark, and you develop the ability to contact your go-between to the your guide to
Control.
go to right to go to um, talk to the people who have transitioned.
Mhm.
People don't have the time to do that. I mean, we've got all these entertainments, we've got electric lights now. They didn't have any of this back then. They had a candle, maybe, and that was it. And so these people developed skills which are virtually unknown today. Craig knows a lot more about this because he has worked to develop modern deep trance mediums who are extremely rare now.
Yeah.
And these people then would sit night after night, and with people who had a relative just die, they would completely go out of their bodies. Their guides would take over their bodies, and they would talk to your loved one right next to them. So that it was not let me see, I think your great aunt Mildred is here. Oh, very vague stuff. It was like that person was right there talking to the guide. And it was detailed, it was sharp, it was a conversation, and you just got to sort of eavesdrop on it. It was unbelievably detailed. And I got to read these books. I have these books actually now in my collection. I think I must have 30 or something like that. And you can't even find them today. They don't exist except in a few collections. I mean, am I right? I mean, isn't this an extraordinary thing to have in your even in your collection? I read hundreds of these books, and in the end, they all had the same process that they talked about getting there, the same details of what it was like there. No, nothing was an outlier. Nothing where the people are all green here, or it's just all misty here, or it was just all the same tiny details. And at the end of that time, Craig, I knew it had to be real because there were no outliers. They all had happened in either Boston or London. I don't think there were any other places that these people were sitting, the people that I was reading about. What would you add to that? But at the end of 2 years, I spent 2 years reading these, and then I was out of law school. But that was it. I knew it was real because otherwise there would not be so many books about the same situation. It was unbelievable. It was wonderful. All right, your turn to talk. Sorry, I get too excited.
The evidence is there. So we have all of these recordings now. We actually have audio recordings of people coming in from the afterlife and speaking through mediums such as Leslie Flint and through materialization mediums such as David. I'll get his name in a minute here. And they would come through and they would speak through these wonderful, wonderful, talented mediums. And we have the recordings of their speaking now. And the reason that we know that they are the recordings of the people speaking is that they're speaking to their loved ones who are sitting in the room.
Yeah,
It might be a husband, or it might be a son or a daughter. It might be a father. And so they come in and they speak to the individual who's in the room, and they speak as though they were speaking over the breakfast table. And they'll speak
it's
for
incredible.
extended period. They'll speak for 45 minutes, have a dialogue back and forth. And the person who is on this side of life, who comes in for these sessions, will come in regularly for them. Some came every few weeks, some came every 6 months, and they would sit down and have this normal, everyday conversation with their loved ones, speaking from the afterlife. And so we know that these are true. And they would tell them things about what happened in their life. We had one who came through, Leslie Flint. Her name was Annie Nanji. She had passed away, and her husband came in. It's Dr. Dinshaw Nanji. He was on the faculty of Birmingham University in the UK. And he would come every 6 months, and he would come into Leslie Flint's office and sit down, and then Annie would come through from the afterlife, and she would speak audibly as though she were standing in front of a microphone. We have the recordings of her speaking now, and she would tell Dr. Nanji about what he was doing in his life, what he did the day before, what he did before he was coming in that day. He talked about the things that were going on in his flat and how he was decorating it. So she was showing that she was intimate with him. She was there with him during those periods
Yeah.
of time. So it was obvious that she was alive and well and
It
living
was,
in the life
it
after this life.
really is amazing.
Yeah.
They would, they answered questions. There was one, I remember um, I think it was someone famous, and I don't remember his name now, but he was talking to his wife, and they had a secret word that he was going to give her to prove he had survived. And she said, well, give me the word. And he said, when I'm there, I can remember the word. But whenever I come to talk to you here, I forget it. It's like I don't have my full mind. In order for me to come here to talk to you, I have to give up that part of my mind, and then I don't have the word anymore. Well, that tells us something interesting about the whole process of like stripping down to be able to come down to talk to the person that they're talking to in this life. All kinds of fascinating things like that about the process too. They were able to tell us just fascinating things. One fellow was very upset because he said that I think I lived a pretty good life. But then along comes this woman, and they're giving her a big parade. Can you hear it in the background? That all the mute. They said, no, we can't hear the music. Well, they're giving her a parade because she made it Jesus said, don't let your left hand know what your right hand is doing. Well, she took that literally, and she made herself do one thing every day that nobody else would know about. One good thing for someone. And if someone discovered that she had done it, she made herself do something else, some other good thing. And they thought they think here that is such a wonderful thing she did, that she did all those good things, that they're giving her a parade now. They give a lot of parades for people who did especially good things. And he was irritated. He said, I could have done that. I would have, but I didn't think of doing that. I mean, we don't change at all, actually, I suppose, when we die. But all kinds of little details from people's lives there that they talked about. Just book after book like that. I mean, I'd never heard of some of the people that were the mediums. There was one book about them, and that was it. But it was so amazing to read this because I was such a skeptic in the beginning. I was sure a lot of it would be garbage. I didn't see one outlier book. No kidding. Every single one of them, the stories were consistent in all all the physics, all the process, everything they talked about. I mean, in one of them, it was like, oh, if there's something you miss from on Earth, just think of it, and you turn around and it's there in your house. I thought, wow, that's pretty neat. But now, why would they do that? Well, the answer is so you won't care about what you left behind. It's trivial. Just think of it, and it's there. Yeah, you don't need it. You realize you don't need it. They talked about how you can build things, but you can't, your mind isn't strong enough. You just draw the picture, and then you call for some people from the sixth level whose minds are strong enough, and they come and they think it into existence, and it shimmers, and there it is. A house, say. All kinds of things they did. So amazing. And finally, I had to just give up being a skeptic. I've never been a skeptic since. I know it's real. As you
Yeah,
do.
we know that the people in the life after this life are able to create things by using their mind. They learn how to do that because they have to give up on what they come into the next life with, which is
Right.
their orientation towards Earth. where you have to work at things and you have to manipulate things with your hands. And so they do learn how to do that, how to create with their minds. They still use their effort. They still use their hands to do it, but it's a whole different process. And they
Yes.
can also, if they want to, use their hands. There's one man who was a bricklayer when he was on Earth, and
Yes, it can
he
build that
just
way
loved
too.
laying bricks, and so he went into the next life, and everyone was telling him, well, you can build this building by your effort, but also using your thoughts so that you use them in combination with each other. And he said, no, I don't want to do that. I want to lay bricks. And so then he kept on laying bricks exactly the same way that he did on Earth. It's a choice that we make. Everything that in the next life is a choice. We're not required to do anything. It isn't necessary that we do something.
Yeah.
We don't have to obey rules there. We are able to make choices of our own, and we can choose to do things as we did them on Earth. We can still eat, we can still drink, we can still sleep if we want to, we can still have sex if we want to. All those things are possible, but we don't have to have any of them in the next life. So everything is free will. It's a free will choice. We always have a free will choice in this life and in the next.
Isn't that beautiful? What a
Mhm.
wonderful thing. These people that they were talking to had just, for the most part, just passed. So they didn't know yet how to use their own minds.
Mhm.
I want to build a house. Okay, well, they'll come and they'll think it into existence for you. And that's why they were watching someone else do it, but they had designed it. Yeah, the whole thing, it's just so beautiful. And I get to see them talk about their own life review, how it was, they got to sort of see how they had affected other people. And that was something which very, in some cases, hard for them to deal with. But that's why I teach how important self-forgiveness is, because you're going to get to see how you affected other people. And that's the hardest thing for some
Yeah,
people
and
to deal
it's
with.
not a punishment. There is no punishment. There's no
No, no,
condemnation. There is no punishment for anything that we did on earth. But we
absolutely.
do relive the experiences and we relive them from the other person's point of view. If you can imagine, we actually become that other person. We
Yeah.
feel their feelings, we feel their pain, or we feel their hurt by what we did, and we feel it as we are being that person. And the
Yes,
purpose of that is not to condemn, it's not to punish, it's to help us understand, to help us realize the effect we had on other people. And
yes,
once we realize the effect we have on other people, then we grow. We grow incrementally every time we go through a session like that. So the life review is intended to help people understand here's what you were doing in your life and here's how it affected other people. And as a result of that, grow up and understand what it is that you can do
yes,
differently. And then they mature spiritually as a result of it.
yes, absolutely right. It's all meant for our good. It's all done in love.
All
Everything
for
is
growth.
love.
Yeah, it's all for love. It's all in love and it's all for growth. So we are continually in a process of becoming. We're becoming in this life. So we grow from being an infant with very limited capabilities into being an adult, into being a mature adult. And then we go on from that into our spiritual life, in which we spiritually grow into becoming a mature spiritual person. So that's one of the reasons we have longer lives now. It wasn't for a period of time, it wasn't until about the age of 55 that people started to really grow and started to learn spiritually. But now our lives are extended so that we can continue that in this life. Then once we go into the next life, then we use that understanding. This is called the earth is called the nursery. This is where we get our personality and our understanding and our likes and dislikes. And then we go into the next life and we process that and we learn from it. And then we can even come back and help other people so that we, in other words, can become helpers or guides. And we come back and we help them to grow while they're on earth. We inspire them. We can't make them do anything. We can't make anybody do anything on earth once we're in the life after this life. But what we can do is we can inspire them to help them to understand, to realize what they're doing, to realize what they're doing to other people, and to have these sudden inspirations that they feel. And so then we help them to grow. And in the process of doing that, we're continuing to grow. So we're becoming more and more the person that we can be, full of love and compassion. And then we will live together in a world full of love, compassion, and brotherhood.
which is what the afterlife wholly is.
Hmm.
That's that's where we're all going.
Hmm.
But the important thing I think is that you everyone listening understand that there is a perfectly magnificent afterlife ahead of all of us, every single one of us. It's as if they design it just to give us the most possible joy. What else would this particular person, what else would you most want to make yourself the happiest you could possibly be when you get there? You could sort of see them giggling. Oh, I think he would like this so much. Oh, this is just what she would most want. They love us so much beyond anything we can possibly imagine. And I think that's, if you take nothing else away from our conversation today, that's what you need to take away, because the love that there is there for you is beyond anybody's ability to understand it. It is just so enormous and overwhelming. You are God's best beloved child. Someone said to me, who that I was meeting, and just briefly, said, "You say that. How can you believe that?" And because I know it to be true, you are God's best beloved child. That is true. It's said to me over and over again, and I know it's true of you.
Hmm.
And
Yes,
we're
it's
just
true.
trying to flesh out that
Hmm.
how that really should feel for you.
Yeah, and most
To
people
be that
don't have
much.
that feeling. Yeah, most people have never had that feeling of unconditional love. But that is the feeling, and that's why in a near-death experience, when the body is relaxed away, in other words, the person is not preoccupied with the body is not dominating what is going on with them. When the body then ceases to function in a near-death experience, they feel this overwhelming sense of love. They're in
Yes,
the presence of an entity who is all loving. And that's the first that they really feel that. We have the capability of feeling that right now on Earth.
yes,
We're held back by the fact that we have been reared in a materialistic world that thinks that we must have everything that we want for ourselves in spite of other people, and we never learn how to simply give love and receive love. But we have the capability of doing that now. It's just that we haven't yet, as a species, matured into that sense. We do get that when we go into the next life, but we could have it here.
I think, Craig, you and I each have that feeling fairly often.
Hmm.
It's just, it's something that you have to recognize and cultivate in yourself. And when you do, you can have that feeling just by calling to God, and God will envelop you with love.
Yeah, and we can do that through our meditation, through our interactions with our loved ones who are living in the life after this life, and with our universal intelligence, which is the source of all being. And if
Yes,
we just relax ourselves into feeling that and allowing that to come through, then
yes,
we will begin to feel that kind of love, that unconditional love that
yes,
is always there. We are unconditionally loved always, regardless
yes,
of what we do, regardless of our
oh, yes.
circumstances.
It's simply, it yes.
Mhm.
When it first happened to me, I thought I was being foolish, but I've now learned to call my spirit guide to me, and he makes it happen without my ever even thinking about it. He loves me that much.
Mhm.
Yep.
Yeah, it is something that happens to you, and it will happen automatically. And the more we enter that space, the more we understand that we are being loved. The more we enter that space, the more that love then comes to dominate our lives. So when we walk out when we leave that area, wherever we were at that time, we carry that space with us. And so we can understand the fact that we are loved always in all circumstances, and we can act based upon that.
I've tried. I'm going to try to find a way to teach. I have a little bit tried to teach it, but you need to have a way. You're right. A lot of people teach it through meditation, but I've never been able to be a good meditator. And I don't think it's necessary to be one in order to enter the space of love. Um, but once you're able to do it and enter it at will, you make your whole body enters it, and I
Mhm.
think it helps your body to live longer, to be stronger, and it certainly helps your whole being to
Yeah.
be able to give more because you have a place from which to give it.
Yeah, that's entirely true. And we do know for a fact that through the research that's been done, that positive intentions, for instance, people who are praying for a group of other people, the people who are being prayed for, their heartbeats and their
Yes.
EEG signals then will synchronize with the person who is praying for them. So they're getting that prayer, they're getting that feeling. And we
Hmm.
also know that when a group of people is prayed for, then they become healthier more often. If they're in cardiac care, for instance, they become well more quickly. They have fewer intubations and other procedures, and they have a general sense of well-being, and they are dismissed from the hospital earlier. So we know that our love for other people, our prayers for other people, do have an effect upon them. So we have the research to show that that's true.
Yes.
Not only that, but there's one study that was done in which there was a control group that was not prayed for, and there was an experimental group that was prayed for by a group of people. And so they were praying for the experimental group. And sure enough, at the end of the process, they looked at the data, and the people who were being prayed for got well quicker. They were having a better state of mind. They had fewer need for medications and for intubations. But the really interesting thing was that the people who were being prayed for, it was a group that was in the cardiac intensive care 12 years before. And that had an effect upon them when they looked at the data of what happened with that group 12 years before. They found the experimental group did get well more quickly, and they had a better outcome than
Oh,
the
wow.
yeah than the control group that had no prayer. And that's because of the fact that there is no space or time.
Of course.
That
I mean, it makes sense. It's
we
still
have an
neat,
effect on
though.
people. Yeah, we have an effect on people over space and time. We can have an effect upon ourselves as children. So we can look back now at ourselves as children and understand them, and that child then will have received that. Our child will have received that then.
Quite wonderful. Oh, my goodness.
Yeah. Yeah, so there's so much more to life than people realize. It's much greater, it's much broader, it's much more interesting. And there is healing to be done there. And all people have to do is to realize that's true. They just have to open their minds. That's the marvelous thing about it. It doesn't take a physical effort. All it takes is opening your mind. And when you open your mind to the truth that we are beings who are greatly loved and that we will continue to live after the body dies, then our lives can be full and fruitful without having all of the worries and the tensions.
I've asked Thomas why it works so well.
Mm,
And he says it's because that's our natural state of being. We're resisting it now. All
mm.
we're doing is letting go and being who we truly are. Oh, my dear one, we have gone way over our time. So, what do you want people to take away from our conversation today?
Just to realize the fact that you are an eternal being, you are having a brief period of time in which you're learning lessons and you're preparing for your next life, and that you will then enter that next life after you leave this one in a painless transition. No one need fear the end of this life. Look forward to it as a graduation into the next wonderful existence.
Yes, yes. Emphasize that it really is painless. You get past all pain
Mhm.
and you're into all joy. Oh, big hug. Big hug,
Yeah.
my dear. I'm just going to say a few words to everyone and then I'll be back to you. Oh. Once again, my beloved friends, we've come to the end of our time. This has been Seek Reality with Roberta Grimes. I'm so happy you could be with us for this today. Please never forget that you are a powerful, eternal being. You never began, you never will end. And when you get that, when you really get it, it changes everything in your life for the better. Next week, our guest will be my longtime friend, TJ Woodward, who's going to be with us for the seventh time. TJ is one of those people who's kind of a public intellectual. He makes the hard concepts look so easy. His first really eye-opening book came out in, I think, 2015, and it was called Conscious Being. Awakening to Your True Nature. To my amazement, I saw that book as fundamentally my own Liberating Jesus, but based in Eastern religious teachings. He's come out with two other very good books since then, and he's concentrated on helping addicts, which I think is beautiful of him. But he's basically a ball of fire, so please be sure to join us next week. I think you'll enjoy him. And of course, this week, our wonderful friend Craig Hogan has been with us for the 48th time. He was, I think, our very first Seek Reality guest 12 years ago. And now he runs seekreality.com, and he does such a magnificent job of that. If you have any doubt at all that you are an eternal being, then go to seekreality.com and listen to Craig. Watch what he has put together there until you are certain that you truly are eternal. Because you are. Whether you like it or not, you're eternal. And when you know that for a fact, when you're joyous about it the way Craig and I are, you're going to love everything about the rest of your life and what comes next. We have no more time left at all, so I'm just going to say this has been Seek Reality with Roberta Grimes. Please enjoy and make the most of the rest of this coming week in our one reality, always knowing that you are a powerful, eternal being, and I mean this truly and sincerely, and God does too. You, most of all in this entire universe, you are infinitely, eternally, and powerfully loved.